Let's go. Number 9. The Brazen Bull. You know that moment when you're stuck in traffic and you fantasize about melting the steering wheel just to feel something? Yeah, the ancient Greeks took that energy and ran with it, straight into the mouth of a hollow bronze cow. The Brazen Bull wasn't a heavy metal mascot, it was a torture device shaped like a bull, designed by a guy named Perillus of Athens, who pitched it to a tyrant named Phalaris like it was Shark Tank. Sir, imagine roasting criminals inside a metal bull while their screams sound like, well, like a bull. And Phalaris, apparently a fan of both irony and grilling people alive, said, "Sold, try it out." So they did. And guess who got tested first? Perillus. Talk about a product demo gone wrong. The victim was locked inside, and a fire was lit underneath. But the real horror wasn't just the roasting, it was the acoustics. The bull had a system of tubes that turned screams into bellowing sounds, like nature's most metal auto-tune. To onlookers, it just sounded like a really upset cow. So while someone was being slow-cooked like a Thanksgiving turkey with commitment issues, the crowd thought, that bull's really into it. Psychologically, it was genius in the worst way, dehumanizing the victim so much that their agony became ambient noise. It's like turning suffering into background music for a barbecue. Basically, the Brazen Bull was ancient Greece's way of saying, we don't just want you to die in pain, we want it to be thematic.
Number 8. Flaying Alive. Imagine your skin deciding it wants to live a separate life from you. That's basically what happened to people sentenced to flaying in medieval and pre-modern times, especially in places like Assyria, where rulers loved to commemorate their victories with murals of themselves peeling enemies like oranges. Flaying wasn't just about pain, though, spoiler, it was very painful. It was about spectacle, symbolism, and sending a message that said, I own not just your life, but your epidermis. Victims were stripped layer by layer, often while conscious, because anesthesia wasn't exactly trending in 700 BCE. The process could take hours. And no, it wasn't like shedding a winter coat. This was your body's entire protective barrier being removed like a too-tight sweater. From a biological standpoint, your skin is kind of a big deal. It regulates temperature, keeps infections out, and stops your insides from casually spilling onto the floor. Remove it, and you're basically a raw chicken left in the sun. Medically, death usually came from shock, infection, or dehydration, but the pain? That came from millions of nerve endings suddenly exposed to open air, dirt, and sometimes birds. Yes, birds. In some cases, victims were left on poles, attracting scavengers. So not only were you flayed, but you also became an all-you-can-eat buffet for crows. The psychological terror wasn't just in the act itself, but in the anticipation. You'd see the knife, you'd hear the crowd, and you'd know your skin was about to become someone's new jacket, which, honestly, is the worst Yelp review a tailor could ever get.
Number 7.
The Pear of Anguish. You've had bad days. Maybe you spilled coffee on your laptop. Maybe you forgot your own birthday. But have you ever been punished with a fruit-shaped device that slowly expands inside your body? Welcome to the Pear of Anguish, a medieval gadget so creatively sadistic it sounds like a rejected prop from a Tim Burton movie. Shaped like, well, a pear, this metal device was inserted into the mouth, rectum, or vagina, depending on the crime, and then slowly expanded using a screw mechanism. Its victims? Often accused of blasphemy, heresy, homosexuality, or excessive talking. So, basically medieval stand-up comedians. The idea was to stretch the body's orifices until they couldn't function properly or at all. It wasn't usually fatal, but it was designed to humiliate, disable, and terrify. Think of it as the Middle Ages' answer to, I'm going to make sure you never do that again, except instead of grounding you, they just, well, pried you open like a stubborn jar. From a psychological standpoint, the horror wasn't just physical. It was the violation of trust in your own body. One minute, you're walking around, minding your business, and the next, some guy in a robe is twisting a crank inside your esophagus like he's opening a pickle jar. And because the pear was often used on people accused of moral crimes, it carried a deep layer of shame.
Number 6. Sawing between the legs. Picture this. You were enjoying a peaceful walk through the 18th century Ottoman Empire, minding your own business, when suddenly you're sentenced to death by being sawed in half vertically from crotch to crown. No, this isn't a rejected Saw movie plot. It actually happened. And no, it doesn't matter if you were innocent. The method was simple in concept, horrifying in execution. The victim was hung upside down to prevent fainting from blood rushing to the head too fast, and then a two-man saw team went to work, starting at the groin and slowly carving upward through the pelvis, spine, and eventually the skull. It could take hours. Now, let's talk about why this was such a favorite in certain regions. First, the upside-down position wasn't just for dramatic flair. It was practical. Being inverted keeps more blood in your brain, which means you stay conscious longer. And in the world of cruel punishments, consciousness is key. You don't want your victim passing out halfway through. That's like serving a 5-course meal and having the guest fall asleep after the soup. From a psychological standpoint, this punishment was designed to maximize both terror and symbolism. Being split in two wasn't just about killing you, it was about unmaking you. Your body, once a unified whole, was now two grotesque halves, a visual metaphor for divine or imperial justice. Some accounts suggest victims could hear the saw scraping through bone, feel the heat of friction, and even see their own body being split, like watching a horror movie where you're both the star and the special effects.
Number 5.
The Iron Maiden. You're standing in a museum, admiring what looks like a Gothic piñata, when the tour guide casually mentions, "Ah yeah, that's the Iron Maiden. People were locked inside and slowly impaled." Suddenly, your casual afternoon becomes a full-blown existential crisis. The Iron Maiden is one of those torture devices that sounds fake, like something a metal band invented for an album cover. But it might have existed. Or not? Here's the twist. Most historians agree that the version we know today, the tall, coffin-like cabinet studded with spikes, complete with a skull on top and a dramatic drip tray at the bottom, was probably a 19th century hoax. Yep, the most iconic torture chamber prop was likely made by a museum curator with too much time and a passion for horror aesthetics. Similar spike-filled devices were used in various forms across history.
Number 4. Hung, drawn, and quartered. Let's say you really ticked off the king. Not forgot to pay your taxes ticked off, more like tried to blow up parliament levels of annoyed. Congratulations, you've earned the full medieval triple threat. You're going to be hung, drawn, and quartered. And no, this isn't a new dating app for masochists. It was England's premier punishment for high treason from the Middle Ages well into the 1800s. Here's how it went down. First, you were dragged through the streets on a wooden frame, drawn, like human roadkill with a side of public humiliation. Then, you were hanged by the neck, but not to death, just enough to dangle and gasp, to feel your windpipe betraying you, but not enough to check out early. Then came the fun part. While still alive, you were cut down, your stomach sliced open, and your intestines slowly pulled out and burned in front of you. Yes, you watched your own guts cook like sausages at a cookout. Then finally, you were beheaded and chopped into 4 pieces, quartered. Your remains often displayed on city gates as a welcome to town decoration. This wasn't just about killing a traitor. It was about unmaking them, body, soul, and legacy. In medieval Christian belief, the body needed to be intact for resurrection. So dismemberment wasn't just physical destruction, it was spiritual annihilation. You weren't just dead, you were unforgivable. And let's talk about the logistics. This wasn't some back-alley execution. It was a public spectacle, often held at major intersections, with vendors selling snacks and kids climbing trees for a better view. It was less solemn justice and more family-friendly festival with the side of organ removal. The message? Cross the crown and you don't just die, you become a warning sign made of meat. Basically, this punishment was the original, "we're going to make an example of you," and by example, we mean a disassembled human IKEA kit on display at the city limits. Number 3. The Blood Eagle.
Let's say you've been a particularly nasty Viking, raiding the wrong temples, stealing the wrong longship, maybe sleeping with the wrong chieftain's goat. The punishment? You might get the Blood Eagle, a legendary execution so brutal, so theatrical, that historians still debate whether it actually happened or if it's just Nordic fan fiction. According to medieval sagas, the Blood Eagle wasn't just a way to kill someone, it was a performance art piece. Here's how it allegedly went down. The victim was stripped, laid face down, and then, this is the fun part, their ribs were severed from the spine using a knife or axe. Then the lungs were pulled out through the back and draped over the ribs like two bloody wings, hence the name. Now, before you start picturing Vikings high-fiving over a man-shaped pigeon, let's talk plausibility. Some experts say the Blood Eagle was purely symbolic, a poetic metaphor for divine punishment, not a real surgical procedure. Others argue it could have been done, albeit rarely, and only on already dead bodies. But if it was real, the physiological horror is staggering. Severing the ribs from the spine would require immense force, precision, and time. The victim, if alive, would likely die from shock, blood loss, or collapsed lungs long before the wings were fully displayed. But that might have been the point. This wasn't about efficiency, it was about myth-making. Psychologically, the fear of such a fate would have been a weapon in itself. Just the rumor that your enemies might turn you into a human turkey ready for roasting could break morale. It's like threatening someone with a fate so absurdly awful that their brain short-circuits trying to process it. They'll spread my lungs? Like a picnic blanket? That's not just terror, that's existential dread with a side of confusion. Whether real or exaggerated, the Blood Eagle endures as a testament to how humans weaponize storytelling. You don't need to invent a new torture device when you can just describe one so vividly that people start behaving. After all, the scariest punishment isn't always the one that hurts the most, it's the one you imagine.
Number 2.
Death by elephant. Imagine being executed by something that weighs 6 tons, has a memory longer than your entire family tree, and enjoys its job. Welcome to death by elephant, a punishment used across South and Southeast Asia for centuries, particularly in India and Siam, modern-day Thailand. Elephants weren't just beasts of burden. They were status symbols, war machines, and, apparently, executioners with excellent job security. Here's how it worked. Criminals, especially those who pissed off royalty, were tossed in front of a trained elephant. But this wasn't a quick trunk toss. No, sir. The elephant was trained to prolong the suffering. It might start by crushing your legs, then hoisting you into the air with its trunk, swinging you around like a sad sack of groceries, and finally, if you're lucky, delivering the coup de grace by stomping your skull into the dirt. Some accounts describe elephants tearing people apart limb by limb, while others mention them playfully tossing victims into the air before letting them drop. The worst part, these elephants were often rewarded for treats after a good execution. So not only were they professionals, but they were motivated. From a psychological standpoint, this punishment was genius in the most twisted way. It combined public spectacle, animal dominance, and royal power into one horrifying display. The message? The king controls even nature itself. If he can command a creature this massive to kill you for fun, what chance do you have? It's like getting fired by a robot that then throws your desk out a window, except the robot is 12 feet tall and eats 300 pounds of vegetation a day. And let's not forget the elephants themselves. These weren't mindless monsters. They were intelligent, emotional beings, capable of grief, joy, and revenge. Some were even reported to refuse executions if they sensed innocence. So, in a way, death by elephant wasn't just a punishment, it was a judgment. And if the elephant paused, looked you in the eye, and still decided to sit on you, well, buddy, you probably did something wrong.
Number 1. Breaking on the wheel. The absolute Olympic gold medalist of medieval suffering, the breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel. Not because it was invented by a cheerful baker, but because it was supposedly used on Saint Catherine of Alexandria. This punishment wasn't just about death. It was about artistry in agony. Here's how it worked. The victim was tied to a large wooden wagon wheel. Then, an executioner, armed with a heavy iron bar, would systematically break every major bone in the body. Legs first, then arms, then ribs, all while avoiding the heart and head, because the goal wasn't quick death. The goal was prolonged torment. Once shattered, the victim was often lashed to the wheel and left to hang in public, sometimes for days, exposed to the elements, wild animals, and the occasional overly curious child with a stick. Death usually came from shock, dehydration, or birds pecking out your eyes. Romantic, right? The psychological horror was multi-layered. First, the sound, the crunch of bones, the screams, the creak of the wheel turning like a rusty Ferris wheel from hell. Then, the helplessness. You're fully conscious, fully aware, but completely immobile, like being trapped in a nightmare where your body is just broken. And the public display? That was the final insult. You weren't just punished, you were exhibited. Your suffering became entertainment, your broken body a warning. Some versions even involved mercy deaths, where a final blow to the head ended it all, but only after the wheel had done its job. In Germany, this punishment was used well into the 19th century. In France, it was reserved for the worst crimes, like regicide or parricide. So, why number one? Because the breaking wheel wasn't just cruel, it was comprehensive. It attacked the body, the mind, and the soul. It turned a person into a living sculpture of pain. It was punishment as performance, agony as policy. And when you think about it, the worst punishments in history weren't just about ending life. They were about erasing dignity, instilling fear, and proving power. The breaking wheel didn't just kill you, it unmade you, bone by bone, scream by scream, until all that was left was a warning on a stick.